Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. I have got Ken Dychtwald is joining me with a little technical problem, so he is rebooting right now, but I've got some business I got to take care of anyway. So the first thing I want to say is thank you so much for watching Foresight TV. I am delighted that you are here for this broadcast. We are at Foresight committed to improving the lives of people who live and work in senior living. So the first thing I want to say is we'd love to hear from you about what you are doing to improve the lives of residents and team members, and we would love to hear how we can serve you better. In addition to Foresight TV, we produce all kinds of great thought leadership content. LinkedIn posts, the Foresight podcast, Tech Tuesday, and perhaps the most impactful thing is the Foresight website, where we publish new leadership content every day. It's free. It's easy to subscribe to. QR code up on the screen. You can simply scan it with your mobile device or tablet. And there's also a link in the chat. And so I just want to say I appreciate your passion for our industry and the people you serve. One more thing I want to talk about, and that is the first ever AI, Senior Living AI conference called the Foresight Lab. We will give you the opportunity to walk away with a solid playbook on how to actually put AI to work. You're already using AI. This is still a great place. You'll learn new things. You'll talk to other people who are doing incredible things. And so love to have you join us with that in January. And before we get started, let's do this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Ken, you're back better than ever. It's a technical problem here that happens sometimes. So I went ahead and started to take care of the housekeeping stuff without you. Let's start with who you are. You're well known in the aging world, but just in case somebody doesn't know, talk to me a little bit about your passion and work you do.
Well, hard to believe now, but I initially went to school to be Hello.
Okay, here we're back. Okay, go ahead.
What I was saying was I initially went to school. I was born in 1950. I initially went to school to be a physicist, became captivated by psychology, got my doctorate in psychology. But in 1974, I think 50 years ago now, I began working with older adults. So I've been working in the field of aging for 50 years, in the first 15 in the not-for-profit sector, setting up wellness-related programs around the world. And then I became captivated by what I called the age wave, which was the idea that more and more of us were going to be living into our later years. There was a decline in the birth rate, and America would increasingly be shifting its focus from youth to middle age and maturity. And I started a company 38 years ago called Age Wave. I've written 19 books. I've worked with about half the Fortune 500, and I've gotten to know you over the years, and I'm delighted to be with you here today.
So did you have any idea when you started this 38 years ago that this was that this is where you were going to be today?
Yes.
Is that right? That's awesome.
I thought that what I saw coming in the future was this, like I said, age wave. And I thought, this is a territory that's brand new. We've never really had the idea of reaching your 60th or 70th birthday with 10 or 20 years in front of you. We've never had the fastest growing segment of our population being older adults. And being a part of the boomer generation, I realized that we had reshaped markets and perspectives all along the lifespan. And as we grew older, we were going to continue doing the same. So in truth, I did see this coming. I've gotten lots of things wrong in my life, but I did see this coming. My 8th book was a book called Age Wave, which came out 35 years ago, in which I laid out all the things that are happening now. And so I've had some fun trying to continue to think about, well, what's coming next? And that's always a challenge.
So I'm sure you've gone back and looked at the book. What did you get right? And were there any things you got wrong?
It's going to sound like so much, cornball, but I got most of it right. I mean, what I saw coming was that older people were going to have increasing power and influence, that marketers were going to eventually get over their ageism to some extent and begin showing us a little bit more respect in our later years. What I got wrong was I thought the healthcare system would come along a lot further than it has. We'll get to that, I'm sure. I also never fully appreciated as a young man the depth of feelings that come along with having a mom or a dad with dementia, or being frightened that your loved ones are going to get sick. I thought of it more as statistics, and the numbers were going to grow versus how deeply people feel the fears of some aspects of aging and also the excitements of some aspects of aging. So I've grown to appreciate that more in this stage of my life.
Right. So you've recently been involved. You produced 2 studies, the new age of aging and the growing demand for age-friendly care. Can you talk to me just sort of at a high level about the 2 studies?
Sure. The new age of aging one, by the way, these studies are all available. We've been doing studies now for 25 years all over the world, and they're all available, no charge, at the agewave.com website. So I don't want people to think I've got secret knowledge here that they don't have access to. What we were probing in that study was, how has aging changed? And I'll give you one example, and then I'll give you a few highlights, and then we can talk about the other study too. A couple of years ago, we saw the Top Gun movie, and there was Tom Cruise, playing the lead and doing a lot of his own stunts. And he was 59 when that movie was filmed. And I looked it up that night when Cocoon was made, and little old man that was a star in that movie was Wilford Brimley. If you can picture him, when that movie was made, he was 49 years old. So one of the first things that we revealed in the study, should be no surprise, Steve, to you or your listeners and viewers, was that people are growing old later. That, we look around and we see Harrison Ford at 82, Indiana Jones return, Oprah's in her early 70s, still a force to be reckoned with. Martha Stewart is 82, was on the cover of Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. And, person just became the next president of the United States, nearing his 80th birthday. So everywhere we look, we're seeing kind of a reshaping of the lifeline. And more we're seeing that older adults have more power, influence, and are to be taken more seriously than used to be the case. I would also tell you that we asked people, what age was old in your grandparents' time? And people came back 60. We asked them, what is old today? And they said 80 or even 85. And the other thing we asked was, what's the ideal engagement in life? Is it traditional retirement? And what we saw was about 3/4 of the population said no, they'd like to continue to work for a few more years. They'd like a better balance between work and leisure, so maybe only work 3-4 days a week or 8-9 months a year, but they wanted to stay connected, stay engaged. They saw a lot of their friends and family members who had stepped out of the workforce and kind of went off to watch TV, and they felt that wasn't for them, that there was a new attitude emerging about engagement and productivity and purpose in one's later years. And by the way, we asked people, what's more important, being youthful or useful? And it came back 4-1, useful. That even though in our marketing and our advertising, there's a lot of focus on everybody trying to remain looking young, what people are now saying more and more is, I want to have a role. I want to have a purpose. I want to play a part in my family, my community, and maybe the entire world. And so that's, keep in mind, Steve, you know this, but throughout 99% of human history, the average life expectancy worldwide was under 18. So it wasn't, there were always a few 50 and 70-year-olds, but not very many. That people were more inclined to die young of acute infectious diseases, accidents, trauma, childbirth, than to live into their later years. So this is a historically brand new time. This is unprecedented. In fact, 2/3 of all the people who've ever lived past 65 in the entire history of the world are alive right now. So this is kind of the new frontier. That's the one study. And we learned all sorts of interesting things about 60 and 70 and 80-year-olds that were kind of new and different. We want our homes designed to be safer. We don't want to fall down. So how do we learn how to balance better? We like to have a healthcare system that's more geared to matching our health spans to our lifespans. And we want to find new purpose. Or if you've been widowed,
we're going to hold our breath here for a second. One of the things I'm just going to add while Telly comes back is I'm hoping, I know when we had problems earlier, he could hear me. So maybe okay, he's back.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So one of the things I'm going to just jump in and finish this thought, and I'll get back to this. I'm going to turn 70 in about 3 months. And I'm going to spend my afternoon of my 70th birthday doing a keynote to a bunch of senior living marketing professionals here in the Sacramento area. But what's odd to me is that I think about turning 70 and I'm thinking, man, 70 is really old, but I don't feel very old. And so, and this is sort of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I go through the same thing. I mean, I got involved in this subject when I was 24. I'll be 75 in a couple of months. And I know that when I was growing up, 75-year-olds were like way old people. But now, I don't feel so old. I'm still working. I'm still talking to you. We're still doing interesting things. I knocked out 3 books during COVID, 2 PBS specials. I feel like I'm productive. I'm still got my wits about me, and I'm lucky to be in love. Got my kids give me a lot of reason to stay up at night, worrying about them, but 75 is not so old anymore.
No, it's not. So one of the things you talk about in one of the studies is this idea that I think the number you used was 71% of people who are age 65 and older believe that their best years are still ahead of them. And I'd love to have you talk a little bit more about that.
That kind of shocked us in a way. We asked people, when do you feel was the best time in your life? And as you said, 71% said either right now or still in front of me. And we assumed that people would say, oh, no, my best years were when I was in my 20s or 30s. And certainly there were some elements of being a young person that people applaud and miss. But no, what folks were saying was that I'm glad to be who I am. And I'm looking forward to what's in front of me. Now, people are still frightened about becoming 85, 90, 95 because of particularly the risk of cognitive impairment and being alone and isolated. But that may change too in the years to come. In fact, I'm believing that it will. I'm believing we will have a breakthrough in the next 5 years with regard to Alzheimer's.
I hope that that's true. I think that this is one of the areas I'm going to jump a little bit on the notes I made, because this is a little bit selfish for me. As my readers and watchers know, I am living the life of a senior living consumer right now. My stepfather, who's 91 years old, who has significant cognitive decline, just over 2 weeks ago, I moved him into senior living, and that was after a horrible week-long hospitalization where I also had COVID, and I was fighting with the hospital about restraints and discharge plans and all of those kinds of things. And one of the things that really struck me was that we have used medical science to really expand our lifespan significantly, but we have not done a very good job of really dealing with the fact that sometimes our brains don't keep up with our bodies. And I'll give you one specific example. He was agitated, he was confused, he was miserable, and I asked to use drugs to take away that pain and misery. And they say, well, we just don't do that. And yet, if he'd had a broken arm or a surgery, they would not have hesitated a moment to put a slap of fentanyl patch on him and take him out of that misery. And so do you have thoughts on how we sort of deal with these almost unintended consequences of growing older?
Yeah, so you're going to get my point of view about this, which may be different than other folks you've talked to. It's sort of a remarkable story that in the beginning of the 20th century, things like public health came along, then antibiotics, then the ability to do surgical procedures with anesthetics and refrigeration so we could keep and manage foods. And then a pharmacopoeia emerged. And the result of those breakthroughs were that more and more of us were going to live longer and longer and longer than our parents and grandparents could have ever dreamed. However, we have yet to really come down hard on the diseases of aging. And I think that we've got to do that. So rather than how do we manage people with dementia or where do we place them, I was lucky when I was around 30, which is a while ago now. I collaborated on a book with Dr. Jonas Salk, who'd had the polio vaccine in 1953. And one night over dinner, he explained to me how in the 1940s, people thought that poliomyelitis was going to be rampant throughout their lives. And so the world was going to need more iron lungs. And what Salk said was, no, we have to end this disease. And I don't want to make a dollar. So I'd like to believe that if we could get more of an uprising, we could bring about an end to Alzheimer's so that my mom had it, your stepdad's got it. It's a crummy disease. Really hits people hard past their 85th birthday. I mean, the percentages are, by the time they're your stepdad's age, it's about 50% of people who survive that long. So not everybody, but a lot of people. And what I'd like to see is an end to Alzheimer's. I'd like to see a vaccine or some kind of a one-time treatment where it's gone. So in the years to come, we don't even have to think about dementia. We can imagine living 70, 80, or 100 years with mental vitality and productivity and the ability to contribute till our last day.
I love that vision. I hope you're right. And I hope they get at it pretty soon, since I'm starting to get to the age where it becomes more real and more important for me. So.
Let me build on that a little bit. And your readers and viewers and listeners, this may come as kind of a shock, but as most of us know, we spend more money on healthcare than any country in the world. That's collectively, but also individually. The average couple in America, in the years from their retirement day to the end of their lives, will spend $472,000 out of pocket on health and long-term care. And most people haven't even thought about that. It's outrageous. So how are we doing? Well, we're 50th in the world when it comes to life expectancy. 49 countries live longer than we do. But even worse, gerontologists are increasingly talking about not just lifespan, how long we live, but health span. How many of our years are we healthy and vital and able to, get on with our lives? And we are 68th in the world when it comes to health span. So what we've created is a healthcare system in America where people grow old, but they're sick for 10 to 15 years, costs them a lot of money, costs the country a lot of money. It's not a win for the public. It's not a win for the taxpayers. And I think we've got to smarten up. The big study, the other one you mentioned, we did this massive survey with the John A. Hartford Foundation, which, by the way, is available at johnahartford.org/crossroads, johnahartford.org/crossroads. And we found that the older adult population in this country only 11% gave it a high grade. Only 11% gave it an A. They felt that by and large, the things that mattered to them and how they wanted to be dealt with and treated and the kind of expertise they felt that they needed was not going on in our healthcare system. So we may have really well-intentioned docs and nurses and physical therapists and such, but get a load of this. In our survey, we learned that 96% of all the medical schools require every single medical student takes a rotation in pediatrics, but only 10% require that anybody learns the basics in geriatrics. Now, how nutty is that we've got an aging population? We saw this coming decades ago, and yet we haven't reshaped our healthcare system to better meet the needs, preventative and maintenance and management. Think about this for a second. 30% of our older population see 5 or more doctors each year. And those doctors often don't talk to each other. So it's confusing, it's a scramble. And we learned that in our study, and we're trying to raise the attention against this so we can create a healthier version of aging in the years to come.
Well, so sort of two questions relative to that. And this is probably the big question, is what does that look like And the second problem that I see in this whole thing is we've got this massive human capital shortage, right? We don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough nurses. The doctors that we have coming out of medical school are a lot more concerned about creating work-life balance. My dad was a physician. I barely ever saw him because he was always working. He saw it as a calling. A lot of doctors are saying, yeah, maybe I'll work 8 hours. I want to work 8-hour days. I want to maybe 10-hour days, but I don't want to be working 12 and 14-hour days. What do we do?
Well, I'll mention a few things. And they're probably, too obvious, but let me mention them anyhow. First of all, about half of what doctors do with older adults are do-overs. So if you don't get it right, if you're not quite sure what you're doing, if you're not really sure how to diagnose an older person, it's going to lead to more problems. It's not going to fix a problem. It's going to lead to more problems. So having more competencies in our health profession that we insist on. I would even say that Medicare should not pay doctors and nurses and pharmacists and such and reimburse them unless they've got a certificate in geriatrics. Doesn't mean they've got to be full-on geriatricians, but they ought to know the basics. Second, this is a perfect place for AI. In fact, I think AI was made for this, that trying to figure out all the different biometrics and test results and speak to different doctors. And now there's a shortage of doctors in hospitals. If we had an AI system that was sort of the central nervous system so that I could get a kind of a pathway to a healthiest version of my future and my doctors could all be better coordinated, it would take less time from human people and we would make fewer mistakes and we could be driven towards a healthier future. And third, I'd say that, boy, do we need to double down on our scientific research. As I mentioned to you earlier, if we could do away with dementia, if we could do away with heart disease, if we could do away with diabetes, if we could do away with cancer, and I know some of your listeners are thinking, that's insane. But you know what? CRISPR is now just beginning, and that comes.
He'll be back, I am sure. Okay, you're back.
We need AI in our recording so that we can do these without losing you. But so more competency, the use of AI, less confusion. And I also feel that if we could have some breakthroughs, we could do away with some of these diseases in the first place. And the last thing I'll say, and this is all too obvious, we saw that 90% of the older adult population knew what they could be doing to be healthier, but only 50% of them were doing it. So some of the responsibility falls on our own shoulders, Since the last time I saw you, I've been working out twice a day. I've dropped 25 pounds. I actually am sleeping better. I'm feeling better than I was in my 60s. So there are some actions we could all take to live better longer.
So is the next thing coming a Ken Dychtwald workout regime?
No, that's not who I personally want to be, but I do think that people are going to be seeking out as they age, doctors or fitness instructors or concierge longevity experts who can guide them towards the right supplements, the right exercise, the right sleep and meditations in order to grow old with more health. My wife, I will say, with whom I've been together for 44 years, published a book this year for women called Ageless Aging. A woman's guide to increasing health span, brain span, and lifespan. And it's become an international bestseller. And she felt that most, women live longer than men to begin with, but almost all the books on health and longevity were written by dudes. And so she felt, as a 74-year-old woman, that it was time to write a book that would be helpful to women. And I've watched that, and I watched all the interest she's getting from all around the world. And I think we need some more guidance, not just on one thing, on nutrition or on exercise, but a more holistic approach so we all could do a better job taking care of ourselves and our loved ones.
Yeah, and I think I think that, I do think that you're absolutely right, that people want to live better lives. They want to live healthier lives. And we almost suffer from so much information coming in from so many places that it's really hard to figure out what's right. And people sort of end up giving up and just doing what they believe.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that there's too much information that's very confusing. You're supposed to exercise. Well, which kind of exercise? For how long? Cardio.
Yeah.
People can know what they ought to do and when they ought to do it and what foods and supplements would be best for them personally, I think is where we're going to wind up in the next few years. That it's just too much confusion right now.
Yeah. So we don't have a lot of time left, and we've talked about this aging thing in general. And I know senior living is something you pay attention to. It's not your primary focus, but I'd really like to, as one of the big discussions we have in senior living is we've got to create different, better experiences for boomers. And the boomers are just, the oldest boomers are just becoming senior living consumers. So if you were advising me as a senior living operator, what would you be suggesting that I do to create amazing life experiences for boomers as they're moving into into our communities and for their families?
Great question. And I'll give you 3 or 4 suggestions that I would also share with operators in the senior living space. First of all, you got a baby boom turning into an age wave. So the numbers are going to multiply of older adults trying to figure out where's the best place to live. Second, I think that this new generation of older adults is looking for a more exciting life, more educational programming, more engagement in their community, and frankly, more opportunities to volunteer and contribute. So a lot of senior living came along, was very insular. You lived in a community and that was it, and you dealt with your neighbors. But the idea of having more involvement with younger generations and people out and about. Also, a lot of older people want to be mentors now. So how do you construct a senior living community where partly what you do is you connect with the local high schools or with local people trying to make it in the business world or with their families, so that these elders can be contributing helpers to the people all around them.
Oh man, this is the worst.
Having a gym or facility with coaches and guides, and also having a little more intelligence baked into the food that you offer, so that if people are trying, for example, my wife and I eat a non-inflammatory diet, which we have learned is the best thing you can do to improve your brain span. And so we don't eat certain foodstuffs in our home. And if I were living in a senior living community, I'd want to make sure that there was no gluten, there was minimum processed foods, there was minimum sugar, minimum fat, so that I could grow old and have a healthy brain and a healthy body. And so I think the communities, and by the way, I do think that more and more people are thinking that senior living may be the right spot for them, and maybe even create some security for their adult children, knowing that mom and dad are going to be okay, and they've got friends, and they've got a community where they're secure, and there's lots of offerings to help them live good lives.
Yeah, and I was at a conference in Las Vegas maybe 3 weeks ago, and I had the opportunity to stay at a human good CCRC in Las Vegas rather than the event. I got the chance to visit with the residents, and I spent some time with the head of the resident council, and he loves it there. I mean, he's got friends, he still drives, he's going out and doing things with his friends outside the community. He's got all this stuff he doesn't have to worry about. Talk about purpose and volunteering. He's deeply involved in helping make the operations at the community better. And so I just really like that. So you had a quote I want to actually talk about as we were sort of running down the clock here. You said, there's this desire to go from success to significance, as an ongoing guiding force in people's lives. And I'd love to have you just expand a little bit about that and maybe even what it means to you.
Yeah, let me point out that the average retiree in America over the last decade has averaged 47 hours of television watching a week. And now they also are spending 12 hours in front of the computer screen. So I don't think that's the ideal. What I have learned in people that have mentored me is that when you're younger, you focus on being a good dad or a good mom or maybe making a career work. And then you grow up a little bit and you start to think about, David Brooks talks about you'll have two resumes, your career resume, and nobody will really care about that. But the other will be your eulogy resume, which is what is it people will think about you and say about you. And that's the idea of significance. Now that we're a little bit more mature, we've been through some ups and downs, some good times and bad. What can we do that will allow us to shine more? What can we do that would be kinder and more contributory to others? What can we do that's not totally self-indulgent, but is rather helps? For example, I'm following all the data, and the younger generations are really going through a rough time right now, financially and mental health problems and such. And I think we who are older should lend a helping hand to help them in our communities get through this rough time. And so success and significance don't have to be everybody does the same thing. But I think if we all take a moment to talk to our minister or our rabbi or our partner about, hey, what can we do in the years to come that's not just about me, but it's about creating a version of myself that's better and more contributory to others, I think the whole world could benefit from that. I'd like to see the creation of, like there was a Peace Corps created 60 plus years ago. I'd like to see an Elder Corps created so that it becomes easier for people as they age to plug in and do good.
Yeah, that is a great idea. I've got a number of friends who are my age who are already retired, and they're people I stay connected with on Facebook, and it seems like their whole career, their meaning and their identity is sharing things on Facebook that are often more negative than positive. And so, watching TV, social media is just, it doesn't make the world a better place.
No, there can be a tendency as we grow older to become cranky and, and angry. And I think we got to do some work on ourselves so that that's not the way people think of older people.
Exactly right. So, Ken, thank you very much. We are out of time. This has been a great, great conversation. You are leaving an amazing legacy. As I look at my life, I'm thinking, it doesn't matter how much money I make. If I make money, it disappears. But if I can change people's lives, that goes on generation after generation. And then that's exactly what you are doing for the world. And that is really remarkable.
Thank you.
Hold on for just a second after we're off the air. And thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.